Today I'm going to be talking about the secrets of negotiation. Many years ago, I had someone give me some great advice, which was when you're negotiating, always be a maybe until you don't have to be. So let's get into it. Right, first up, preparation. There's that old adage, by failing to prepare, you are actually preparing to fail. So it's important that you do your homework. And do your homework on your counterpart, and that should really be a given. By understanding their needs, their goals, and what their leverage points are likely to be, they will not only give you a clear strategy, but also help energize your confidence when it counts most. Winging it will not get you anywhere, and it will leave you on the back foot of any sound negotiation. A good place to start is by spending time negotiating with yourself, by brainstorming on all of the potential angles, especially as you've done your homework. It's also good fun as well. This is a good time to decide also on an exit strategy. Knowing when to walk away is paramount, as if you don't know when to leave, you won't know what's achievable. Preemptive. Um, a preemptive strike is quite a high stakes technique. But if you read the room well, it can have a huge impact on the negotiation. What makes this strategy so exciting is the simple fact that you can introduce this measure at any stage of the discussion. After all, at its simplest form, it's no more than your opportunity to test the water looking for a pushback. Here are some examples. First up, by making a first strategic offer early doors. Many years ago when I was in the most trade, here's as an example, a company approached me, and it was one of the first rare headhunt opportunities I had. And they approached me because I was in a similar role for another company, and they come straight in with what was a very, very generous offer. And I kind of got the feeling, they want me, and that's great, and that's, a nice feeling and what have you. But I also thought, if I'm going to do this, I want to get it right for me. So I kind of assumptively went along with the whole concept of their offer and what they were doing and promises that were being made. But I also knew as well what they were doing. It was fine. There you go. I want you on board, and that's the end of it. And what I did was carried on. We got to the final stage when there was an official offer on the table. When it come to literally coming ready, getting ready to sign. And then I hit them with a counter offer. And I just put on the table, well, if I'm coming, this is what I want, and this is the kind of money that I'd like as well. And there was a bit of huffing and puffing, and there was a bit of toing and froing, but eventually we agreed a deal, and I believe that both parties were happy. But that's an example of someone making a strategic offer where they just went in for the kill, and the whole objective was to sort of blow my mind with, wow, look, this is an amazing offer. That's just, where do I sign? But instead, I kind of took some time and had a look at it. Other examples, by focusing on building rapport and trust, is a good way of negotiating, and also doing that before actually considering even looking at terms. Another one is by focusing on the value rather than price. Another option is by pushing for a challenge, and you do this by gently just dropping into the conversation a tease or a challenge in order to get a pushback. And when I was in the most trade, early stage of being a salesman, we used to have this form, and on the back of the form was just BMWW, and the prompt there was to challenge your customer. Predominantly it was male, that said brave man without his wife, and the whole objective was to kind of unsettle him a little bit, to get him to, push back and say, oh no, I'll make my own decisions. And the reason you do that is as you head down to the negotiation table, um, he's got less and less room for manoeuvre because you've already covered that angle. If under counterattack, sidestep their advances by looking behind their position and consider what are they actually after. Another one is by being hard on the problem but soft on the person, whilst making sure that you do not make that big mistake of being soft on both. Another one is by inviting criticism instead of defending your ideas and asking what went wrong. By doing this, you may find another gateway in. If they keep rejecting anything you say, ask them, if they were in your shoes, what would you do? And here's a simple rule with all of this. Never give or concede anything without getting something of value in return. A good example of that, I think, there's a movie called Draft Day, and the main actor, Kevin Costner, he's in the middle of, he heads up an NFL team, and he's a GM, and his role is to negotiate on draft day. And he's lost all of his, in the early days of the pre-negotiation, he lost all of his future picks for the next 3 years. And then he kind of, the play puts him back in the driving seat and puts him in a position where he can actually go back and renegotiate. So what he does is he lures in his prey, and he discloses his position, and he says what he wants, and the counterpart takes in a big intake of breath, realizing that they've kind of got themselves in a bit of a position here, and they need to kind of either agree or walk away. And then finally they concede and they agree to Costner's terms. However, by then he goes in for a further squeeze and a further request, and at that stage it really has got his counterpart on the ropes, and like, not angry, but just boxed into a corner. And then finally they concede that final point and the whole deal's done. But that's a great example of never conceding anything without actually getting something of value in return. Right, questioning. Great mention at the top. Be curious, not judgmental. Allegedly, I think it was Walt Whitman who said it. I think it was more Ted Lasso personally. But yeah, it's a very valid point. So when it comes to questioning, you've got to ask yourself, how calibrated are your questions? Do they lead somewhere, or are they just random and lead you from pillar to post? Either way, the fuel required to keep the fire burning is curiosity. If you can keep judgment at bay, then curiosity will allow you to steer your thread of questions in the right direction. Remember, steering the whole process is a big piece of the puzzle. Don't forget to start with open-ended questions. Examples: who, what, why, when, where, before gradually narrowing the path to closed questions. And if you need help prompting some questions, well, just go and sit with a 3-year-old for an hour or so and they'll sort you out. And remember, don't try and close them down with closed questions. It just won't work. That, my friends, is an exception to the rule. So here's a few pointers. When dealing with counter offers, ask for more details, explore possible trade-offs, and be creative with your response. Try the technique of mirroring questions by using some words from their previous response, as this will reaffirm that they have been heard. Try diffusing any doubts or concerns by calling out any negatives. Example: you might think that. If you find yourself being constantly rejected at every turn, try asking their advice. What would you do? If you find yourself constantly having to defend your position, try asking outright, what is wrong with these thoughts or ideas? Sometimes there is a need to challenge a given situation. Maybe they are struggling with a problem. Try, have you given up? Knowing that the prompt will draw a direct response. Next slide is just simply entitled No. Or, as a friend of mine used to say, don't let them tickle your tummy. Remember, it's not a full stop, it's just a comma. Sometimes your counterpart will use a simple no as no more than a tool. It's their way of staying in control, plus it helps take the pressure off of them. It also offers some much needed breathing space to buy some time and help them pause as they anticipate your next move. In this situation, it would be wiser to concede the point and not immediately push for a yes. Instead, your focus should be to establish whether their no is genuine or just a smokescreen. And once you know, take the appropriate action, which would be to push on by steering with sound reasoning or to back off and try a different tact. I've got an example of a no, or a good positive no. One of my daughters, when they were young, well, they were a good few years ago, they were at lower school. And I was, that particular day, I was dropping my daughter to school, and because I was early, because I was going on to work afterwards, we sat in the car. And I have to be honest, it was making me late, but I sat with her, and as we were sort of chatting away, this lady tapped on the window, and as I put the window down, she sort of looked across and said, "Oh, hello, darling. Would you like me to take you into school and let your dad get off?" And she simply looked at her, my daughter, and said, "No, thank you." She said it politely, and there was this silence, and and I felt embarrassed. I didn't, I was kind of almost getting ready to say something, and the lady went, "Oh, okay, well," and thank, and off she went with her children. And I remember sort of looking at my daughter afterwards, and then she sort of shrugged her shoulders and said to me, "Well, I'm saying yes to you because I'd rather sit with you than go with her. So listen, pick what you like out of that, but I think that's a great example of someone standing on a no." Right, emotions. Be intentional. It's not always possible to keep your emotions in check. I think it's a fair comment. Sometimes a wound might be brushed that you did not realise you even had, or a button pushed that triggers a fight or flight mode. So with this in mind, it is important to remain logical. No invitation is necessary for your ego to take hold. Possessing technical empathy will help you to continue to steer your position whilst acknowledging theirs. So keep on track. Be hard on the problem, not the person. Remember, I said that earlier. And remember, it's not a battle. It's just steering. Silence, silence, as they say in France. Be comfortable in your own skin. A good practice is to spend time in your own company, being silent. If you can manage to do that, then try spending time in silence with another person. Being on public transport does not count because we all do that. Now, try slowing things down, allowing your breathing to become more gradual. Be aware of your body movements and slowly bring them to a pause. And finally, spend some time emptying that busy mind of yours as you interrupt those 60,000 plus thoughts that enter your head on a daily basis. Did you notice the silence then? How does that feel? Empowered? Now look at ways of bringing that comfortability into your negotiation. Invite pauses into the conversation. They are powerful and will allow you time to think with clarity. The more comfortable you feel about your silence, the less empowered your counterpart is likely to feel. And you may even end up with an unexpected concession from them, so zip it. I'll give you another example of silence. When I was in the motor trade, shows you how long ago it was, because the vehicle in question was a Renault 25, and they went out of existence, I believe, in about 1995. Anyway, this chap had a small business. He ordered a Renault 25 executive car. It was probably £23,000 worth of car, and he did it on a lease. And anyway, it come to D-Day and he come to collect the car. And I could tell there was a problem straight from the outset. And the problem was the realization that he was trying to get out of the deal. I don't think he wanted to sign it, and he was coming up with all of the excuses in the world. So preempting that, I grabbed, I had a line manager at the time, and we kind of gently moved into a room, put the paperwork in front, and then we discussed all of his points. And he wasn't being particularly transparent. I think he just wanted to get out of this deal. But we'd ordered the car, we'd registered the car, we'd had full insurance and everything. So it was not a walk away scenario. So we sat, allowed him to talk, and then finally we sat in silence, and we sat in silence, and we sat in silence. And interestingly enough, he was the first one that spoke. And the first thing he said was, I know exactly what you're doing. You're closing me with silence. And the simple fact is we were. But the interesting thing was he was a trainer, a sales trainer for a living. So it was fascinating. Do you know what as well? It was good fun. But we got there, and in an agreement in the end, I think he was suffering what I believe to be buyer's remorse, and he went off. And I did follow him up sometime later, and it turned out he was actually more than happy. So there you go. And finally, I want to finish with closing the deal itself. This is supposed to be the fun part. If your focus is all about winning, you've missed the point. So make sure the scales are as even as possible. Otherwise, it's not negotiation, it's a take. It's a whatever you want. If you've done your job well, you've had a whole host of face savers up your sleeve, but with no need to use them. Take your time and do not rush things. Never request. Look to recruit instead. Seduction, that's not a solution. If there is a need to squeeze, have some go-to closed questions at hand. Finally, summarize your agreement and confirm and set deadlines. I've got another, just a fun bit of a final as I talk about closing. I had a customer in the early days of being a car salesman, and he came in, and we always was a bit frustrated because it was going to be a company car sale, but he was an SME, so there was a chance you might get it. But he'd had 3 of this car make on the trot, and it was his go-to car kind of thing. So, and he thought, and it was almost like, well, I'll give you a shot kind of thing. So I arranged this test drive, and we went out on the road, and while we were chatting, he was telling me, I got into him, and we found out a little bit about him and his interests and everything else. And the long and the short of it, I thought, well, let's have a bit of fun while we're here. Let's go to a car dealer that sells his car, that it was his go-to car. So that's exactly what I did. We changed, we swapped, so he was driving the car now, and we got to the car dealer, and I said, come with me, and we got out, and I had a jacket on that was the mark of the French manufacturer I was working for, and we bowled straight into the car showroom, and I said, oh look, I've got a customer here, and he's interested, he's just driving my car, and he's interested in this car that you've got here. And I knew exactly what was going to happen, and what the long and the short of it was, they told me to, in no uncertain terms, leave, because I think they thought I was just playing and messing around with them. And it did get, not ugly, but weren't far off of it. It was like a go on your bike kind of thing. And I kind of looked at the fella as if to say, well, that was a bit off kind of thing. So we went back, got into the car, and then he turned around and said to me, I think I'll go with your car after that behaviour. And I said, well, okay, that's fine. So that was just a bit of fun, and I think that was a great way of just not even putting a close on the table, but by just allowing him his own choice. So I hope you've enjoyed it and you've found this of interest, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye.